Content warning. This video will mention abuse. Abuse. What is it? Is it just physical violence? You bitch. Perhaps even psychological manipulation. Hey, which way you going, you blind fat cotton brain cow? Well, as someone who, as you may have guessed, came from a background of a form of abuse, I should be able to answer all of that. But I cannot share my experience to answer this question. Not that I don't want to, I desperately want to, and I promise one day I will share my experience. But people from abusive backgrounds like mine must be very careful with how we come out, especially if our abusers are still active. So I'm taking care of myself with my own situation by not revealing too much for now. Also, as a heads up, I know the comment section of my videos can sometimes be seen as a safe space, which I try to make it so, and I want everyone to make sure you're protected from repercussions before posting your own story about the topic if you want to share. For now, we'll just get on with the video, but I won't be sharing my experiences. Okay? Got it? Great. Let's get started. I think the first question I have to ask is, should people publicly talk about abuse? And the answer is, it depends. Just because I can't doesn't mean everybody shouldn't. It's a weighing of the space you are in. It depends heavily on the culture of where you are and the safety of yourself as the victim. We're supposed to cut to the interview. Cut to the interview. Cut. What gave you the openness to talk about your situation publicly?
I don't think I ever had reservations about talking about the abuse I experienced. My silence was mainly caused by the fact that nobody would listen. The people in my hometown were all convinced my parents were two perfect people who could never treat their children badly, thanks to the masks they wore. And later, when I was in a different place, I was told I should just get over it and move on.
Has talking about it publicly had any impact on your life?
Hmm. Um, It felt like such a relief to finally have an audience that actually listens. Talking about it publicly and seeing my readers' horror has helped me confirm that it wasn't all in my head and I wasn't overreacting. It was all real and my reactions were warranted. I felt validated.
That's Obelis, by the way. She's the author of comics like Getting Over Him and War and Tea. She's also an abuse victim who shares a story in The Recloseted Lesbian and Meow Are You. And her accounts of her experiences are precisely why we need to listen to victims. It gives their pain validation and the courage and support needed to stand up to abusers. Because if you're in an abusive relationship and have never been exposed to positive relationships, you'd think abusive relationships were the norm, and are more inclined to continue to suffer because of that. But what if these victims are lying, fat man? You squeal unreasonably. What if they tarnish the names of innocent people? Well, if they are. That's a big if. Then it will just be a mistake. We get embarrassed, throw out some apologies, spend $50 on a midnight Cross Island cab ride to confront a possible abuser, only to find nothing actually wrong and was all a big misunderstanding. So you put it in a video on YouTube as an anecdote 3 years later. I think if the price of possibly saving someone from suffering is getting a little embarrassed in a $50 cab ride, that's fine by me. Getting validation when treating trauma can be life-changing. While most people think that kids these days are too pampered and weak and making mountains out of molehills, the statistics shows a far more different reality. That those mountains are real. That most people who ask for help actually needs the help. Wow, surprising. And this culture of everybody's suffering is normal can make people in genuine danger think that their suffering is normal too. Do you remember what life was like for you and how you felt before you had the validation that your comics and readers gave you?
Before the validation, I didn't even realize that many of the things that happened to me were not all right. Whatever environment we grow up in, we consider that type of environment the default. So I thought that being mistreated was normal and thus nothing to complain about.
A common misconception about abuse is its type. I made some skits at the start of this video poking fun of the phenomena, but not understanding the types of abuse that exist is actually a real problem. While physical abuse can definitely be a part of an abusive relationship, it is not the only part, and often it is entirely optional. But because abuse is often depicted in this way in culture and media, it gives the false impression that it is the most common type of abuse, that physical is all there is. However, fact is, abuse only requires one thing: a recurring pattern of behavior used to maintain power and control over another. And this can come in many forms. But I want to focus on a single lesser known type to really dig this idea of abuse home. Let's talk about financial abuse. This is one of the hardest forms of abuse to bear witness to, not just because it's terrible, but also because it can be completely invisible, even to the victims. Financial abusers targets people who are unable to manage their finances for one reason or another. This includes people in poverty and gamblers, but also old people with diminished mental capacity and young people who do not have financial independence. They do this by, well, manipulating money, a thing which is fake, but it's real enough here to have an impact. You might be more familiar with common financial abuses like scams or legal financial abuse where you use the law to control someone else's finance, like what happened to Britney Spears and lots of old people. Basically, taking money. But you can also financially abuse someone by giving money. And you might be wondering, how does that work? For example, as is the case with what happened between the YouTubers Oz Media, Wonderstruck, and their abuser Blair, the Illuminati. It's a complex, still unfolding situation, but very simply, Blair provided financial help, transport, jobs, housing, and more under the guise of kindness to Oz Media and Wonderstruck, only to turn it into a guilt trip of gratitude, and finally into a form of indentured servitude of Oz Media, and the complete uprooting of Wonderstruck's life while the two became financially indebted to her, where she had a hand in their salary, housing, and transport, and using the idea they are financially irresponsible to isolate them from friends and family. She basically controlled their life. You can watch their expose videos to get a first-hand recount of textbook financial abuse, which includes insane accounts of horrible events from theft to modern-day peonage. I hope you're now starting to understand what is the crux of an abusive relationship. It's not causing pain or suffering. Those are the side effects. It's all about control. What would you say about the common idea that abusers must get physical for something to be considered abuse?
I think most people claim abuse is only physical because if they admitted that verbal and psychological abuse is also a thing, they would have to accept an uncomfortable truth that many people in their lives, or maybe even themselves, are abusers. It's more convenient to imagine abuse as some hard to achieve action that requires physical energy, because then you don't feel under a threat of easily committing abuse yourself.
An abusive relationship is one of purposefully implemented disorganized attachment. I've talked about this on the channel before, but never in depth. Attachment styles are basically the bonds you form with others when you take a risk and face a threat. Say you're about to eat a potato chip flavor you've never eaten before. You ask your friend, does it taste good? And they say yes. So, boosted by their support, you eat it with confidence and it tastes good. Success. This is secure attachment. There's a threatening activity, eating the chips, a source of worry, the taste, and a source of comfort, your friend. And when everything works out, you get to stay safe and build trust. Anxious attachment is when you require more comfort than reasonable to face a threat. So even after your friend tells you the chip tastes good, you go online to check reviews, look for second opinions and all that. A single point of comfort isn't enough in this case. Quantity over quality. That's anxious attachment. But what if you forgo the review? What if you don't even ask a friend? What if you just eat chips as they come because you think the only taste buds you can trust is your own? That is called avoidant attachment, where you don't trust anyone. Disorganized attachment, however, is when you ask someone if the chips taste good, they lie to you and tell you yes. You eat it and it tastes like crap. You still need that person's opinions in the future, but you can't trust them fully now. So in any new attempts of risk-taking, they will also become a threat. That is disorganized attachment. It's basically a toxic relationship. An abusive relationship, however, is when that disorganized attachment relationship is weaponized. I like to call this an abusive attachment. Someone who tells you if the chip is good or bad depending on how they want you to feel. Control. They might even give you bad chips on purpose, just for the lols. They then overwhelm you with care right after you've been abused by saying things like, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. I'll do better next time. I won't tell you it's good anymore. Or I won't hurt you again. And every now and then, they will still tell you truth and show some care. But whenever they want, they will lie to you and hurt you. They condition you to crave the drips of truth and care they give. Just enough to keep you coming back for more. Because we like the care. There's even a term for this. It's called love bombing.
The victim gets addicted to the happy substances that their brain floods itself with every time they get love bombed. And as a result, the victim gets addicted to the abuser themselves. It's just as much an addiction as, let's say, alcohol or nicotine, with similar withdrawal symptoms. At least that's what I have observed from my own experiences. For example, one time my ex-abusers self-harmed and then told me they did it because I was not replying to their text. Therefore, it was my fault. Just an hour after that, the same person was talking about how much they appreciated me and became very sexual. Sex is an efficient tool for love bombers. The human brain creates so many happy substances as a result of it.
At that point, they have control over how you feel. Their power over you is the trust you have for them. You want to believe in the goodness, the trueness of their words, that it was indeed just an accident or your own fault. I wouldn't need to beat you if you've just gotten an A on the test. You wouldn't need me to shout at you if you just listened to me. The car would still be yours if you only kept working for me. My heart wouldn't hurt so much if you just replied to my text. These are all phrases of abuse. And that's not to say that if you're a victim, that makes you gullible. Abusers take actions during times in a person's life that requires increased trust. Children and elderly who can't take care of themselves, young adults and people with midlife crisis who are listless, and even people changing jobs or dealing with grief. Anyone can fall victim if the conditions are right. Not because of personal failings or weaknesses, but because we've developed these instincts to trust others for times of great need. It's how we've survived as tribes. It's how we grew up to love our parents as children. It's how we learn to love other people. It's how we're human.
How do you see your potential future now?
In my current life, I'm already free from abusers. In my future, I hope to be free from many consequences of my trauma too. Not every consequence of trauma can be made to go away some of a life, but I am having fewer flashbacks and breakdowns with each year that passes since I last talked to my abusers, and I hope this trend continues.
Especially in comparison to how you viewed it in the past?
In the past, I didn't really think about my future. I just assumed I would die soon. So thinking that I might actually live is a big step here.